Welcome to another episode of the Refined Peasants podcast. I'm Wyatt.
I'm Garrett.
I'm Nick.
All right, let's get after it. Okay, today we're talking about the Founding Fathers, and you're gonna have to forgive us. One of our podcast members just got their wisdom teeth taken out. Nick, say hi.
Hello.
All right. Well, so if he sounds not very clear, or if we ask him a million times what he means, just know that that's what it is.
No, it's because he's on lore tabs. He literally. What time would you get him taken out today, Nick?
1:15.
Yeah. So just
10 hours ago.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Fucking hurts.
Yeah, the fact that you can flap your jaw this much is pretty astounding. We had to beat him with a club to get him in here.
Yeah, he was not budging on whether or not he wanted to do this thing, but we got him in here, and that's what's important. All right, so we can start off with George Washington. Okay.
So I mean, if you're an American or British, you know who George Washington is. Probably in different context, but George Washington was the first president of the United States. First commander of the Continental Army. He also is credited with the establishment of Mr. President as the title for the presidency. I think it was John Adams who suggested some stupid, long, royal-sounding name. And George Washington straight said, no, that's stupid.
How about Mr. President?
Yeah. How about you quit being a pretentious prick?
Mm-hmm.
He also started the 2 terms precedent, which means he served 2 terms, 2 4-year terms, and then said, you know what, that's enough for any man.
Mm-hmm. Only FDR has served more terms.
Yeah. Fucking.
What is it?
I'm better than George Washington.
Also, he turned down the chance to be a king. They wanted him to be a
Oh,
king,
yeah.
and he said, no, we just got done fighting a war against kings. We're going to do this a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He didn't speak often on the the system of government we should have, but when he spoke, he was definitely heard.
Yeah.
So originally that was the plan, and then basically, the old man stood up, and he said, "No, we're not doing this." And everyone basically said, "Yeah, you know what? We're not doing this. This is a horrible idea." Just pretended like it was their idea all along.
Yeah, George Washington stand up, say, the sky is now red. Well, son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
He really is kind of a folk hero in America.
Mm-hmm.
George Washington crossing the Delaware. Valley Forge was kind of the same thing. But you just hear all different kinds of stories about the kind of man he was and just how much influence he had on the country as a whole. And not just militarily, but like I said, writing the Constitution, his influential opinions on what government should be.
Mm-hmm.
And just with the populace, even the I'm sure loyalists hated him.
Patriots loved him.
Yeah, you couldn't be a patriot and not love George Washington.
At that point.
So we're going to get a little bit into his history of just who the man is, and that's kind of the goal of this podcast, is we'd like to introduce our listeners to the at least 9 most relevant founding fathers. Mm-hmm. So you can find lists of founding fathers with up to 23 members. You can find them with 13. You can find them with 15. There's all different kinds. It's still kind of up for debate as to what makes a founding father. But the 9 we're going to go over today, including GW, they're always there, no matter what.
So no matter what list you're looking at, it's going to contain at least these 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Nick, do you want to get us rolling on his war history?
All right. So, sad to say, was not a good general.
Wow.
In the sense that he couldn't win a lot of battles.
Okay, do you mean perhaps before the Revolutionary War?
Both before and during, he was not necessarily the best general.
I knew
if you go by his win record, he was great at motivating men. And granted, he was fighting with a bunch of farmers.
Okay.
But it wasn't until the French and Spanish intervened that we actually got a foothold.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I know in the early days of the Revolutionary War, George Washington was getting thrown.
And I don't even know if it was him who fought the Battle of Saratoga that made the French.
It was Ethan Allen
Yeah.
who fought the Battle of Saratoga. I know that for sure.
And that's what the ultimate decision. The French said, all right, we can get in.
Mm-hmm.
So as a he could inspire his men, but he could not.
He himself may not have been the best general.
No, he didn't have, and I'll give it to he had a lot less numbers, as well as probably a lot worse technology. I mean, they had to steal cannons from Ticonderoga.
Mm-hmm.
And black powder.
Yeah, they had to steal a bunch of stuff just to have artillery.
Well, we didn't even really have a navy. We just had merchant ships that we took stolen cannons off of and put on there, and we were like, there's your fucking Royal Navy.
We paid pirates to take out British Navy.
The only naval person we had was John Paul Jones, where there's a certain town in England today that you do not mention his name if you are from his family.
Like the Sherman of Britain or something?
Basically, yeah.
That's hilarious.
Like, he was the only Navy captain we had who knew what he was doing, and he was a former captain in the British Navy.
So a pirate. If we found him, he was a pirate.
No. So he came to America. He stole a man of war from the British.
So he's a pirate.
Yeah, so he sounds like a pirate.
No, so he had. So he was.
No, he's a thief of ships and cargo.
He came to America, and he was our naval commander.
Okay.
He was our Navy. So he just stole a British man of war and said, "All right, let's do this." and he would go around wrecking ships.
I'm confused as to where the difference between man who stole man of war and pirate is.
Well, Garrett,
like where's the line here?
Garrett, if you had a rowboat, would you not want to steal the fucking?
You know what it is, Garrett? It's titles. This man was technically not a pirate because you can't be both a pirate and a commander of our Navy at the same time. There you go. Got him on a technicality.
They literally said,
some bitch.
Find a man of war and use it. He said, okay, there's a man of war. I'm going to steal it.
This is another, I know this is kind of going back a little bit, but I think it's Ticonderoga where the saying, don't fire till you see the white of their eyes.
That's New Orleans.
Was that New Orleans? I thought that was somewhere in the Revolutionary War because they were so short on ammunition.
Bunker Hill, maybe.
Bunker Hill is you don't fire till
because they ran out of ammo.
Yeah, they were out, and they were like, you don't waste these musket balls because there ain't more coming.
So, so the reason George Washington wasn't the best fighter is he wasn't good in the French Revolutionary War, and he wasn't really a good tactician until late in the Revolutionary War because of who was the French?
Marquette, right?
I think so.
Van Buren?
No, not Van Buren.
Lafayette
came and trained his soldiers.
Is he the one that wrote the book, the manual on like how to set up a base camp?
Yes.
So Lafayette was credited with a lot of training the Continental Army, I believe.
He did, and he was very harsh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well,
he was a very punishable man.
He was French. He's got that little man syndrome.
So,
I just want to add on to what you're saying here. So, looking it up on Google, George Washington, and this is strictly the Revolutionary War, he fought in 17 battles. He won 6, lost 7, and it was a draw in 4. So he does have a losing record. I'm going to count draws as a loss, too, personally. So I'm going to say that's 11 losses to 6 wins.
So... I lost my train of thought.
Back to Washington.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I mean, really, like, on paper, if you wrote down, I'm going to hunker up here for a winter with no boots, no supply of wood, no tents.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds about as bright as an idea about, camping in the suicide forest in Japan. Like, that sounds like an awful idea.
So playing with a Ouija board.
So to his credit, for winter, you didn't fight battles.
Yeah.
Because it was almost impossible to move your men through the snow in winter. Fucking Russia proved that. Yeah. And so he crossed the Delaware, surprised the Hessians.
Yeah, it was
like Christmas, wasn't it?
Okay, here was the funny part. So the Hessians knew he was coming because they got word, or they had a letter written that said Washington's going to cross the Delaware, and they said it has to be fake because it's winter and no one's going to cross the Delaware River at
when
this time.
When it's frozen with no goddamn boots.
So they partied because I can't remember. Oh, it's some special holiday. I don't think it was
Christmas.
It was Christmas. Oh yeah, it
was Christmas. He murdered a bunch of British mercenaries.
He didn't murder. He did basically what Ticonderoga did. They walked in. They were all drunk, sleeping. He'd kick open the door and said, "All right, surrender." And they had no choice.
Look at me. I'm the captain now.
It's essentially what he did.
And they were like, Hans? They had no idea. They were German. Hessians are Germans, if y'all did not know.
Hans gets the musket.
Being German, I take a lot of pride that our national, what would you call it? Our ethnicity, our genetic ethnicity, had a hand in like every major war ever.
That's not always good. It's not always good. Not the second. Not the
there was
second.
World War One, World War Two.
Yeah, definitely not the second one.
Like,
right? Not proud of that one.
Yeah,
no. I'm just saying, like, it... Anyway.
That's like if you're like a descendant of Jefferson and you're just like, yeah, I'm super glad about the whole slave thing. It's like, no. Pretty much everyone's against that part.
For all you know, he could be one of the slaves. One of the slave children.
That's...
I mean, based on how many children Thomas Jefferson had, he probably is one of the slave children.
Yeah.
So... Washington, great moral man.
Oh, yeah. For the most part.
I mean,
especially given his writing.
Considering he was fighting the greatest army at the time with the greatest navy, he didn't do too bad. I mean, there were a bunch of times that he should have lost, and we shouldn't be Americans. But nature intervened, and he snuck away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so that's a good point that I really want to hit on again. George Washington took a bunch of farmers with recycled guns and munitions and fought off the single greatest empire up to that time.
Mm-hmm.
Great Britain at the time was the world superpower. They had colonies everywhere.
America, Africa, India, parts of Europe.
China, I think. They had Hong Kong.
The South America, the Caribbeans. Pretty much.
Yeah, the Caribbean was British.
If it was discovered,
South America was mostly Spain and Portugal. But either way, like the point stands that he fought off the world's greatest superpower.
For sure, at that time they were
sure.
second to no one. I can't even think of anyone that could compete with them. I mean, They had just beaten France.
The only people
they had just come off. That's why France joined us, was because they were like, yeah, fuck them British dudes.
It took the combined powers of France and both Spain to beat them. To beat them outright.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you a little incentive how good the British really were. Better trained. And what really beat them was guerrilla warfare. You're marching in red uniforms in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
A tactic that he picked up in the French and Indian War.
You got these guys from Kentucky with these long rifles who they're used to shooting 100 yards and hitting dead on all day. I mean... It got so bad that the Kentucky riflemen. God, if you were caught, no, this is
because Kentucky wouldn't have been.
The Kentucky riflemen are who Andrew Jackson enlisted because the army he had to hold New Orleans wasn't enough, so he had to pay not only pirates, he had to pay a group of mercenaries. So that would have been the War of 1812, then, not 100%. I know this.
Territory.
Well, I was gonna say because Kentucky wasn't a state during the Revolution.
It'd be a territory.
I don't even think it was a territory.
Mm-mm.
I mean, there may have been people living in Appalachia, but there was.
Because you're talking like west of West Virginia, which was West Virginia was not even a thing
it was
back
just
then.
Virginia.
So
but
way
Ohio.
west.
Where is Kentucky?
Well, we had the Ohio River Valley. We didn't have Ohio for a while.
Yeah, Ohio wasn't a state. We just owned just like we owned. It's relative, but
okay. So
I think we pretty much touched on. So like Nick mentioned, he also fought in the French and Indian War. He's also just another part of his military history. He's the only president to, while being president, in person lead an army.
He's the last president to do so.
Yeah, first and last. But that was the Whiskey Rebellion.
Yeah,
or something.
Shays Rebellion. Oh, funny fact.
Fun
fact. He's technically a murderer. He admitted it. Now, for context, during the French and Indian War, he was a commander, and he had a fort. And he beat this French platoon, and they surrendered. Well, the Indians with him decided, no, we don't want surrendered, so they killed him. The French got word. The French came to his fort, took it over, and in the little treaty he had to sign, he admitted to murdering these surrendered men. So this would boost French morale as this is a cause worth fighting. Yeah, this is an atrocity. We need to fight back. So technically, convicted murderer.
I mean, not convicted. He's an admitted murderer. And I mean, I guess to his credit, he's taking blame for what his subordinates did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying that George Washington murdered all these Frenchmen.
No.
It's...
You know
he
what's
was
crazy?
the one who admitted.
The craziest thing to me is that, like, throughout his whole time as a general, I mean, this dude is a surveyor who we turned into our general, right?
Yeah, that's all it was.
And the fact that he was never wounded, not once.
Well, so the British didn't target.
Not
no,
grazed.
no. He was targeted heavily.
Really?
His hat was shot off.
I was going to say, he's been shot up, like, his clothes have been shot,
Yeah.
but
like his clothes
he
were
himself
shot
has not
to
even
hell.
a graze.
His hat was shot off twice, I think.
That's astounding. I thought, like, the rules of warfare for Great Britain were you didn't kill officers.
No.
And that's why it was that's why it was such a shock when the Americans started killing officers.
No. So the thing is, you wanted to kill officers. They were just so far behind the battleground that the only way to kill them was with your cannons and artillery to shoot over there. But George Washington would always basically be on the battlefield.
He's like, I'm right fucking here. I got this cavalry saber, and it needs lubrication.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, let's...
So that's his military history.
Right. This is George Washington as a general. So I think we're going to get a little bit more into... Do you want to go, or do you want me to go?
You go for it.
Okay, so I've got some quotes here from George Washington that I think really help establish just what kind of person he was and what he thought about certain different kinds of topics. So, one's God dictates the kind of law one implements, and also controls the application and development of that law over time. So he thinks your religion is how you apply your law and where you find basis for your law.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not he carried that over to anything, that's a topic for a different time. But so next quote: "Precedents are dangerous things. Let the reins of government then be braced and held with a steady hand, and every violation of the Constitution be reprehended. If defective, let it be amended, but not suffered to be trampled upon whilst it has an existence." So he didn't trust government. He didn't trust power in general, which, I mean, he did just get done fighting a war.
Yeah, if there's anything, like, all of these 9 guys that you're going to find out that they agreed upon, if there's one thing they feared, it was tyranny.
Yeah.
And they were so afraid of themselves being a tyrant that they put stuff in our government to hold them back, and that's
they
crazy.
put handcuffs on themselves, which is amazing because you don't normally get powerful men do that.
Yep.
Well, this one's going to his religious
Okay,
stance.
go for it, and then I'll take over.
It is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favors. I got 2 more. They're short.
Okay.
A government is like fire, a handy servant but a dangerous master. It is much easier at all times to prevent an evil than to rectify mistakes. So, again, like we just said, he was obviously someone who did not trust authority, or definitely didn't want tyranny, like Wyatt had said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let you get into the religious aspect of it.
Okay, so this is going to be more of a discussion because Washington, so all of our founding fathers were independent thinkers. They probably didn't fit perfectly into probably any branch of Christianity. And we'll get into it in a minute if some of these guys were even Christian. Most of them were not. But Washington was kind of private about his religious matters. We know his wife was Christian, Martha. She was very Christian. Here's the case against him.
So we also know he was a Freemason, which Freemasons typically are deists, maybe not Christian exactly, but they do acknowledge a higher power, a universal entity that is God.
Right. Well, I guess then let me explain what deism is first. So deism is like, if you can imagine the universe as a clock, and God is a clock maker, a deist would be someone, or would be the God who makes the clock, and then they just let it tick. A theist, like a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu, they would be, a clockmaker that interferes with their clock, changes the hand, adds cool designs, That would be a theist god. But a deist god, they just watch the clock tick. That's all they do. Freemasons are almost entirely deist. All of them, mostly. And that's a big case for George Washington. But here's another one. So he denied Holy Communion. which to us doesn't sound like a big deal. In 18th century,
Well, so communion
that is a huge
communion's
deal.
a Catholic rite, though.
Well, they
Not all
believe
denominations.
I think Martha Washington was Presbyterian. That's a huge deal in the Presbyterian church. It was a huge deal for him. So much that a rumor had started that him and Thomas Jefferson were atheists. Because he also refused to kneel for prayer.
So that's a little odd if you're any kind of deist. Well, I guess not, because if you think God's a clockmaker, who doesn't? If you're a typical Christian, you don't really have an adverse reaction to kneeling for prayer. Communion, I can understand, so we're Lutheran, we take communion. But a lot of denominations don't practice it anymore.
There's also evidence that, he at the very least didn't believe in a divine Jesus.
Which, by necessity, makes him not Christian.
Right.
You can't be Christian and not believe
exactly, which
in
is
the divinity of Jesus.
And on his deathbed, he refused to meet with a priest.
Wow.
That was a big one for me.
That was a big deal back then as well.
Well, I'm just saying, if there's any place you want a priest, it's on your deathbed if you're a Christian.
Exactly.
Also, Martha Washington was the only reason he went to church.
Yeah.
His
wife.
Well, he would.
So
church.
Here's what would happen for the communion. So they would go up at the very end of the service, and then he would just walk out and wait by the door. So at that point, which raised some eyebrows because that's not common back then.
So his actions kind of speak louder than his words.
Right. Well, he never personally wrote about it. That's why we don't really know. It may be possible that he did believe it and he just didn't do communion or
he just
whatever.
Doesn't like church.
Because there's nothing in the Bible saying you had to go to church or take communion to be faithful.
Well, back then,
communion's a Catholic doctrine, and that kind of went through when the Protestant Reformation started. Baptism. So kneeling in prayer, that's for sure.
That is an odd one.
Yeah. Because.
Oh, and by the way,
we don't kneel, we stand.
This is all.
That's true.
All of this is according to the Smithsonian Institute Council on American Research on Washington.
So I wonder if it's because he didn't kneel for communion. Because Nick's right. So in Lutherans, we stand when we pray. We don't kneel.
As a community, though, but they're saying at Valley Forge he wouldn't kneel to pray.
Would he pray though?
We don't know.
No, hang on. So I feel free to quote me on this. I'm confident I heard it on the History Channel and not on Ancient Aliens, on an actual historical show on the History Channel. But he went out to pray before Valley Forge. He rode off into the woods, so his men are starving. He's running out of ammunition.
So he prayed, but we don't think he didn't kneel when he prayed.
Did he pray to a Christian God?
Obviously, if he didn't acknowledge the divinity of Jesus, he didn't pray to a Christian God. Maybe the Abrahamic God, which I get for people who aren't theologians can get a little confusing, but
Yeah. No, I get you. But that's about all I have on Washington.
Okay. So just final thoughts on Washington. So war hero, general, first president, very influential political figure in the founding of our nation, even under the Articles of Confederation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which is something. He wasn't technically the first president. He was the first president under the Constitution. People love, but we were only under the Articles for 4 years?
I have no idea. It was a short amount of time.
It was a stupid, George Washington was the first president. Don't come at me with your bull crap. Nick, you got final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm trying to fact check if he prayed at Valley Forge.
He may have prayed, but he did not kneel. So
there's a famous painting of him and his horse, and he's on one knee praying. But from what I can see, the consensus is we don't know if it happened or not.
That could be.
There was no written.
Really? Oh.
It's mostly just word of mouth, I think.
Oh.
I'm gonna look more into it.
So it may not be true at all. So the painting may be where they may have showed the painting on the show, and I'm thinking
it's also
I thought he had a vision at Valley Forge.
He technically did, I think. But think about this: when he's crossing the Delaware River, the painting on there shows the American flag. We didn't have a flag at the time, so
it's artistic
it's probably
narrative.
It's probably
after the
more
fact.
symbolism that if he prayed, he probably kneeled because Christian beliefs is
Well,
so do you have a reference for the fact that he didn't kneel in church to pray? Or is it...
Yeah, so this is all according to
that's
Smithsonian.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So this is independent research done by the Smithsonian.
Right.
So, I mean...
It's a council of people, too. It's not even just one person.
Okay.
Which I thought was...
that's as good a source as any.
Okay.
So,
let's move on to the second guy.
Real quick. So the story of Washington kneeling in prayer originated from Isaac Potts, who recounted it some 40 years later.
Oh.
This has happened to his pastor. It happened. So he basically got a story from the pastor at Valley Forge.
Okay.
Reverend Nathaniel Randolph Snowden.
Okay. Here,
So,
let's move on. Let's move on. We've been on Washington for almost 30 minutes.
Sorry.
Oh shit! This is gonna be a long.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to move the fucking ball forward.
Well, some of these will be pretty short. Like I don't have much on the Adamses or anything like that.
Okay. So, you got Alexander Hamilton next, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Alexander Hamilton. A lot of you probably.
If you fuckers start singing that song, I will kill you.
I'm not a big fan of the play. Now, from what I found of Alexander Hamilton, I love the dude. Him and Thomas Jefferson, probably my favorite. And the two didn't like each other at all.
You just don't like, or you like Hamilton because Hamilton lacked a filter.
I do. So the biggest contribution he had that I'm aware of is he was a co-author, quotes, of the Federalist Papers. He wrote 51 of the Federalist Papers. Articles 1, 6 through 9, 11 through 13, 15 through 17, 21 through 36, 59 through 61, and 65 through 85. He is the predominant author of the Federalist Papers. Now, if you don't know what the Federalist Papers are, I'll let Wyatt explain what they are because he's better at doing it than I am.
Well, essentially, we had just written our Constitution, and they were apologetics explaining to states why they should ratify the Constitution.
See, he's better at it than I am.
And our Supreme Court references the Federalist Papers for historical intent.
Man, the most I know about Alexander Hamilton is he lost in a duel to Aaron Burr.
Honestly, it is sad that every significant thing he ever did got reduced to him losing in a duel. That is a little sad
about
to
that
me.
duel. So when they went to do the duel, Alexander Hamilton, because usually you took turns. So Alexander Hamilton, it wasn't you walk 10 spaces, turn around, shot. That's a myth. You would walk in, you would usually take turns. So Alexander Hamilton, he shot at the ground because he didn't want to kill nobody. He didn't want to kill Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr took his sweet time just aiming at his chest.
So Burr saw him shoot his pistol into the ground.
Oh yeah, this is a very popular thing.
And then took time and aimed.
He might as well just walked up to him and shot him in the head.
He told Alexander Hamilton told his son too. He said, "I'm gonna waste my shot, and he's gonna kill me," because he knew. Do you know why they dueled?
Oh, it was an argument.
He costed Aaron Burr the governorship in New York. Because Aaron Burr, there was a debate in an election with Thomas Jefferson, where Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr had the same number of votes, and Aaron Burr could have just been like, okay, everyone knows I was supposed to be vice president and Thomas Jefferson's supposed to be the president. But instead, Aaron Burr decided to be a jackass. He said, why can't I be president? I got the same number of votes as Thomas Jefferson. I won the same number of states. I got the same number of votes. Yeah.
Wasn't Alexander Hamilton the leader of the House at the time?
No. He never held a role. He was Secretary of Treasury. That's the highest you've ever been.
Okay.
I think he was also an ambassador to France at one point.
But,
I could be wrong.
So, he convinces the House. It's the first time the House, at that point, had to elect the president through the House of Representatives.
I'm like the third one.
Mm-hmm. And so, stalemate. And Hamilton did not like Jefferson. But he said, Aaron Burr, that dude is crazy. This dude will ruin our freaking country. And not only did he cost him the presidency, Aaron Burr tries to run for the governor of New York. Alexander Hamilton's from New York. He doesn't want that motherfucker running his state. So he, usurps him, gets somebody else elected, and Aaron Burr gets all pissed and challenges to him duel, and that's the duel. But as far as what did Alexander Hamilton think? What was his thought? What do you think, Eric?
So just to explain his thinking, and so I'm gonna tell you my favorite quote when I get to it. But it is by far my favorite quote out of probably any of the founding fathers. I think Samuel Adams or John Adams has my tippity top one. But So, first one, those who stand for nothing fall for everything. I mean, that you still hear that nowadays. I mean, so you gotta have your convictions, and you've got to be like, you gotta know what you believe, or you will. People will convince you of a ton of bullshit. And I think that's really for independent thinkers. I think that you'll be willing to change your mind, but when you know what you know, stand strong. Give all the power to the many, they will oppress the few. Give all the power to the few, and they will oppress the many. So again, this goes to just the founders' fear of tyrants. They're like, no matter who you give power to, they're going to wield that power against those who do not have it.
So, Alexander Hamilton was right to fear power because he was an orphan who, if I remember right, was he not sold into some sort of it wasn't necessarily slavery, but it was like slavery. He got out of it in the terms of a war. Go him. He gets freedom and he now has to go fight a war. Stays with Washington, and he becomes Washington's right-hand man throughout the entire war.
Wow.
And he is never, so he naturally, his worldview doesn't, he didn't come from money. All of these founding fathers came from money. Literally every single one.
George Washington owned a plantation. I don't know, Benjamin Franklin, he was a self-made man, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I'm sure he inherited a little bit of wealth. The Franklin family was pretty rich in Pennsylvania. But Hamilton was not. And he wasn't an educated man. But he was smarter than every single one of these motherfuckers besides maybe one. And he'd let you know, too. He'd be like, what use was that philosophy degree? Yeah. And if he thought your idea was stupid...
You're going to hear about it.
He was going to tell you it was stupid.
He's for sure going to tell you
it was stupid. But, and he didn't put up with no bullshit neither. But I'll let Garrett go ahead and finish where you were leaving off.
So, like I said, on that last quote, I really think he really feared giving the sword of power to anybody. Just because he knows whoever has it is going to wield it as a tool to oppress others. And, I mean, that's, I think, one of the best insights into humanity. I mean, so since the dawn of time, and I don't want to get too far into this, but since the dawn of time, there have been two classes of human. The haves and the have-nots. And until the end of time, there will always be two classes of human. The haves and the have-nots. And, it's an astonishing amount of awareness to realize that. And, we think of these people so many years ago, hundreds of years ago, maybe not having the self-awareness that we do today. Excuse me. But they clearly did. So, third quote. There are seasons in every country when noise and impudence pass current for worth, and in popular commotions especially. The clamors of interested and factitious men are often mistaken for patriotism. I love this quote because it's what's happening now. So we have a very small minority on the left and the right that make the most noise. And people mistake that noise for worth. And, on the right, we mistake it for patriotism. On the left, I call it stupid. But I just found it highly relevant to today's time. Basically, what he's saying here to me is just because they talk louder than me doesn't mean they're smarter than me.
So Alexander Hamilton definitely... So he didn't trust... It's not that he trusted nobody with power, but his worldview was that, some people are just naturally born leaders.
Like Washington.
So him and Washington... So a lot of people describe their relationship as almost like a father-son, but if you think about it, people think, oh, that means that everything was great. Not that kind of father-son relationship. More of okay, I respect the hell out of you, even though sometimes you do some dumb things, right? So through warfare, Valley Forge on paper was a stupid idea, but it was that they believed it was possible that made it possible.
Well, and their faith in Washington as a general.
So his whole thing was, you could have the most brilliant strategist in a war, but if your men don't believe in you, the ability to run through bullets on your behalf, you're not going to win any battles. He said he would rather have, the man that everyone believes in than the strategist that no one believes in.
Right.
So the problem is, Valley Forge wasn't a stupid idea.
And the same with our government.
we're kind of done with Valley Forge.
Yeah, okay, well.
Because that's more of a Washington thing.
But,
Good thing. So, your take on Alexander Hamilton and Jefferson, they didn't really hate each other.
you want to fucking bet?
So Hamilton endorsed Jefferson.
I'll bet your fucking wisdom teeth they did.
Yeah. So Alexander Hamilton, he endorsed Jefferson for presidency.
Okay.
This
no.
is what no. This is because this is
He
what
endorsed
caused
him over Aaron Burr.
This is what caused Burr to challenge him to the duel.
Because
Well, that was the governorship.
it was a lesser of two evils.
Right, but he still endorsed Jefferson.
Well, his candidate. Well, yeah, he was like, "Look, I don't like Jefferson, but that man Aaron Burr gonna get us killed."
Right, I'm just saying that's still an endorsement for president.
I mean, I get it, and it's not like he endorsed people to go vote for him. It was in the House, and he told these representatives, like, "Look, you have to vote."
I don't know if they took it to the House. I think
they did. Absolutely, they did.
I think the first time
Nope.
it ever went to the
Nope,
House.
you're wrong.
Was...
They took it to the House. I promise.
Well, it's not saying this is the first time. You did say it was.
It is the first time.
Let me look at it because I think the first time it ever went to the House was Jackson and
Nope,
Adams.
took it to the House.
Jackson was. Wait.
Andrew
John
Jackson.
Adams.
John Quincy
Quincy
Adams.
So then that would have been after Jefferson.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
So then Jefferson was anyway. Okay. God, I need pain meds like you're on, Nick. So going to your point that Alexander Hamilton didn't hate Jefferson, this is the best quote I have. There are approximately 1,010,300 words in the English language, but I could never string enough of them together to properly express how much I want to hit you in the face with a chair. And that is Alexander Hamilton to Thomas Jefferson in the Continental Congress.
They hated you. People hated each other.
I wonder who
I think
kept
it was a
those.
mutual respect thing.
I wonder who kept those notes, because it had to be Madison, because Madison was like the note taker.
I don't care who it was.
That's hilarious.
Classic.
That's hilarious.
Okay, so we're gonna get into. I've still got a few more here. I got three more. Why has the government been instituted at all? Because the passions of man will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint. So to me, that's he's noticing like humans aren't very good at restraint. Like we don't hold ourselves back very well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say it's an innate evil.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like the concept of original sin. Like anything we take, we can corrupt, and we do what we will with it. And that's not always a good thing. It will be of little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their own choice, if the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood. This is another one that was just perfectly relevant. We just passed a stimulus bill that was fucking stupid long, that no one even read before they voted. You know how long the Constitution itself is? It's like 5 pages. Okay? 1,000 pages. I don't know what the average size of a modern bill is, but it's obscene. And again, the majority writer of the Federalist Papers would be appalled by that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is the last quote for him. Here, sir, the people govern. Here they act by their immediate representatives. That was his intent for this country. You act by those who you elect to represent you. And I mean, he fulfilled it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the only person he was really willing to give power was the people. The people's right to choose who represented them would dictate who had power at the time. And I mean, it's working out pretty great so far.
Some people.
Yeah, some people.
He was not, he was one who wanted just property owners to vote and educated people to vote. He was not, some of our founders wanted everybody to vote. He was not one of those people. But he did think that the people who were elected should do the will of the people that elected him. Just to wrap up on him, I mean, dude was definitely more than likely a Christian. And the reason that that's relevant is you'll see why, as far as like the founding of our government. But if there's anything he feared, it was a tyrannical religious state, because he had just suffered all of the faults of his life because of the Church of England. His mom died because of it. His dad abandoned him because he was drafted into the British Navy. He was sold into basically fucking slavery.
Yeah.
And then he had to fight them.
He went to a church. Where
You could argue partially because of religious persecution, but I feel like mostly it was the taxes that got us into the war. You know, I don't think that's crazy. But definitely, I think he was definitely a Christian, but he acknowledged the dangers of
theocratic fascism.
Well, here's a quote from him that I got. He said, "The most abominable crimes have often been carried out throughout history in the name of God."
Yep. And it's hard to argue with that. I mean, so you got the witch burnings at Salem, you have the Spanish Inquisition, you have the First, Second, and Third Crusades. So I mean,
Muslims too. It's not just a Christian thing.
Yeah, it's not just a Christian thing. This is
not.
all. I mean, what the Jews did. Jews did to Palestinians when they first conquered the Holy Land. What the Syrians did when they first conquered.
But he was also a man of principle. So he said, you know, he was very much a free market guy. If y'all know who John Locke and Adam Smith are, they're free market people, libertarian theology. He said, "A free market and the religion in which people would choose whichever faith was right for them, thus ensuring the widespread tolerance would become the order of the day." So to me, that just means, you know, he wanted a secular government to protect religious minorities from a hypothetical state religion.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I just don't think he wanted a state-sponsored religion.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the only way to have freedom of religion, in a sense, would be to have freedom of religion in the state, right? So the state itself cannot have official religion, because, well, what happens? Well, then the religion on top starts persecuting the religions at the bottom. It's the way it's always been.
Well, we'll get farther into the religious topics when we cover the Constitution and the amendments.
Okay, that's fair.
Because like I said, it's 12 already, and we've still got 7 other ones.
Yeah, we're 40 minutes in, so this should be interesting.
All right, so my next one, everyone pretty much knows this one, Benjamin Franklin.
Right.
So Benjamin Franklin, the dude on a $100 bill, pretty famous inventor for the time, author of the Poor Richard's Almanac, which was the first written almanac in the Americas, I think. Scientist, inventor. Some of his inventions are bifocals, rocking chair, lightning rod. Things that are still used today. I mean, the lightning rod is still used today. He's also founded the first fire department in Philadelphia.
Bifocals are still used today. And glasses.
Well, yeah, but I don't think they're his design.
I think
the lightning rod is basically
I think he perfected it.
Could be. Let's see. Actively was one of the biggest ambassadors during the Revolutionary War to France. That was his main contribution to the war effort. That and publications. So he owned a printing press, and he printed. It wasn't the Federalist Papers.
Common Sense. Maybe.
No,
so
that's not. That's
I think he did print Common Sense, but there were some other books that he printed to help encourage the.
He mostly did newspapers.
Well, he did do newspapers.
He was Philadelphia something. Was his newspaper?
Oof.
No idea.
I don't know,
Also,
but I know he changed it over to start printing propaganda for the war effort for the revolution.
Also a Playboy guy.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Heavily into drugs, heavily into all kinds of narcotics and women, despite his age.
He got who did we send? We sent Jefferson and Franklin over to France.
Franklin was during the Revolutionary War. I think we also sent Jefferson, but I really want to say that was after. I think he was actually ambassador to France for a little bit. So was Franklin. But
when Franklin got there, the first thing he did is said, "Show me to your first brothel and let's go."
Yeah, he's a horny old dude. I mean, I ain't gonna deny it. But he was a powerful thinker. And was one of the older ones among the founding fathers.
He was
a wizened old man.
See, the problem, though, he was known to sleep through these the debates. They had to keep waking him up.
Well, when everyone's saying ideas you already thought of and dismissed, like you're just sleeping, waiting for them to get back to your idea and admit it's the right one. But yeah, so his main activity during the Revolution was to encourage France to join us. I don't have a whole lot else on him, so I guess I'm going to get straight to the quotes. They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. This is a popular one you hear all the time, even today. So, if you're willing to give up your freedom for safety, you deserve neither. I just tend to agree. You should never surrender liberty for safety, which is why I hate fucking masks. We are all born ignorant, but one must work hard to remain stupid. This is, I think, really important because I've always highlighted a difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance, so you may not have had the option to be informed about a certain topic, to make yourself learned. Stupidity is knowing, so stupidity is, here's a book on the subject you need to learn, and you just throw the book away. Don't even bother. Being stupid requires a willingness that ignorance doesn't. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
I mean, so we're all like the quote says, we're all born ignorant. But especially in the information age, you have to choose to remain stupid.
It's like being ignorant's like, your kids in high school, they're teenagers, they're gonna be sleeping around. And you're just choosing not to acknowledge it or choosing not to believe it.
Where did that come from?
Well, that's okay. That is a thing for ignorance.
We're getting off this topic right
Yeah.
now. We're getting the fuck
if you want
off
a difference between them, ignorance is like choosing not to believe something because you don't want to believe it.
Well, and so I would have said high schoolers don't know how to pay taxes.
Or change a tire, change their oil.
Well, you should when you... God damn. Next quote. Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. I think that's pretty relevant in these modern times, too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you see injustice, whether you're a BLM supporter or whether you're sticking up for Chauvin or whatever, you have to get as pissed off as the people who are actually affected by it for justice to be served.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So this one actually goes to the earlier quote, but being ignorant is not so much a shame as being unwilling to learn.
I think that's certainly true. That
Yeah.
one especially.
Yeah. Ben Franklin was a very educated man, and he spent most of his life trying to educate other people through his newspapers and through his almanacs and just making information widely accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Last quote for him. It is the responsibility of every citizen to question authority. I could not agree with this more. Whoever's in power, you've got to question their motives, you got to question their intent, you got to question everything. Because people in power, power corrupts.
Do you think we do that for all people? Or do you think we just do that for whatever side?
I think we should do it for all people, but...
Well, that's not necessarily what I asked, though.
Yeah, I think we do it...
I think we do it selectively.
Pick sides.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the problem.
And I would agree with you. So what do you got on Ben Franklin White?
So he's a Freemason.
Yep.
This guy was definitely a deist. He actually had some harsh things to say about Christianity, which definitely hurt. I think definitely hurt like the evangelicals' feelings in this country. Like whenever our country was first being founded, but they learned to live with it because basically everyone realized that Franklin was a very, very, very smart man. He even calls himself a deist in his own autobiography. He tells about how he read about deism in college and just fell in love with it. He said, "That's what I am."
That's what makes sense to me.
Yeah, being a Freemason. He didn't value liberty necessarily as much as our other founding fathers. He just more of like a question authority type thing. Not disobey authority either, more just question authority,
Right.
Which is, can be different.
It posed the question, should I obey?
Right. He's also the oldest, really, founding father. Yeah. So whenever all this was happening, he was in his 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he was going around France fucking whores in his 80s.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And let me just explain.
He's got better libido than all.
Let me explain to you for reference. So our country was founded also by a bunch of young guns.
Yeah.
Hamilton's 21.
Wow.
When the Revolutionary War starts, he's 21.
That's crazy.
That is insane.
So it's 1787 when they start the Constitutional Convention?
No.
No, it was after that. But 1789, right?
Ratified June 21st, 1788 is when the Constitution is ratified.
Yeah. So Washington was 44, but Hamilton was 21, and he's the big idea guy.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. Like, our country was basically invented by a bunch of little kids.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Little kids in the modern perspective. I mean, I'm 28, and I don't see a 21-year-old as even a fully functioning adult.
Right.
Because I was a 21-year-old not too long ago.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else, Wyatt? I'm sorry.
No, that's about it.
All right, so these next two are going to go pretty quick.
You got next.
I got John Adams.
Mr.
Really?
Beard.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I guess Wyatt's going to go into John Adams a little bit more. So the only real details I have on him, he's a political philosopher, and he was the second president of the United States.
Okay.
We'll go straight to the quotes. Now, I do have a lot of quotes, but I'm going to speed through these a little bit just for time's sake. Let us tenderly and kindly cherish, therefore, the means of knowledge. Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write. Don't just do what you're told. Educate yourself. That's what I get from that. This is tied for my favorite quote. Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be your wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. So if any of y'all listen to Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings, that's John Adams. He is ripping off John Adams.
Yep.
Circa Constitutional Convention. And I love it. Because I totally agree with that. Facts don't give a shit about your feelings. Let's see. A constitution of government once changed from freedom can never be restored. Liberty once lost is lost forever. So, I guess the modern equivalent of that is you can vote in socialism, but you shoot your way out.
Socialism doesn't necessarily mean less liberty.
No, I'm just saying, like, that's the equivalent of what he's saying. We can argue about socialism at a later date, but...
I'm saying he couldn't have been talking about socialism.
Right.
Because socialism wasn't a thing.
So you can vote in a monarchy, but you have to shoot your way out. I think... Oh, I got one more. That's not super long-winded. I say that power must never be trusted without a check. So again, this goes to all of our founding fathers. Really, like, the whole system of checks and balances was just to prevent tyranny.
Was it Adams or was it Madison that wanted checks and balances?
We'll get into that.
Okay.
I'll get into that, I promise.
I can't remember which one was it.
So that's what do you got on John? And then we'll get to Samuel.
Second president, that's the biggest one, right?
Yeah.
It's actually really funny because so he was running with a guy named Pinckney, and basically, so the first presidential election, we didn't have tickets, so whoever came in first was president, and whoever came in second was vice president.
Yeah.
And everyone basically said, okay, well, if you're for John Adams, you also vote in Pinckney, and if you're for Jefferson, you also vote in Burr. Well, they didn't really, Alexander Hamilton didn't really trust John Adams because John Adams didn't bow to nobody. He was nobody's lapdog. And Pinckney was. So Alexander Hamilton told people, like, hey, vote for, somebody else and vote for Pinckney. So that way Pinckney becomes president, John Adams becomes vice president. That was the plan. He fucked up. Nobody voted for Pinckney. Everyone voted for John Adams and Jefferson.
So we got like his worst nightmare.
So Alexander Hamilton really got the shaft here because, the second dude he didn't want was president, and you can't impeach him because the first dude you don't want is your vice president.
Yeah.
So it's funny. So Jefferson and Adams were best friends until this election.
Jefferson and John?
Yes. John Adams were best friends until the election. Because they held no... Y'all thought elections to now are bad, like with what presidents call it, like people call each other? No.
Yeah, mudslinging's not a new thing.
I know
for
there's.
sure.
I know I have to look up the direct quote. I can't remember which one did it, but it was like, huh. But this basically ended their friendship, and this made it because you have two different parties, one president, one's vice president. You can't get nothing done. Because every time Adams wanted to do something for a law, Jefferson's like, no, you got to do it this way. And
I've actually got that covered in the Constitution. The whole reason it was amended was because you would get VPs. Like, the second runner-up was always, like, of the other party.
Mm-hmm.
So you could never get anything done. Which doesn't make a lot of sense because the VP today doesn't have a lot of power. They're basically... I mean, they're just the head of the Senate. But I guess... I mean... That's one extra seat in the Senate. That's the tie-breaking vote.
Right. Probably his most infamous thing was he signed a pretty horrible treaty, which we'll get into whenever we talk about another founder. Basically, it got us into war with Britain.
Which war?
War of 1812. Okay. Yeah.
That's Madison.
Okay, so let's face it. The War of 1812. Well, we'll get into it when we get there.
No, you're
because
wrong.
I've got a difference of opinion.
The War of 1812 was Madison.
I'm aware. It's because of a treaty by...
Signed under Adams.
Yeah. Not much. Signed. He founded the Marines. That's a big one. Treaty of Tripoli unanimously passed. I don't know the last time Congress did anything unanimous.
Yeah.
Passed the House and Senate. There's no way. We probably couldn't find a single bill.
Now, just to make sure, unanimous is 100% support.
Yeah, that's what this was, right? Yeah. This was. I mean, that's just absolutely.
I mean, even after 9/11, Bush didn't have unanimous support. He had majority, but
he only had one person not want to go to war in Iraq.
Yeah.
Yep.
So pretty damn close to unanimous then. But
that's the closest we've come.
So during the election, Jefferson called Adams a hermaphrodite and being a...
This is real. Like, people can go verify this?
Yes,
this is insane.
The Chicago Tribune talked about this because this was very big during...
Okay, there's no way.
That early in our nation's history, though? Well, Ohio wasn't even a state then.
No. So the Chicago Tribune may have done research.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm understanding. Because you're right. Like, Illinois wasn't around. Like,
right,
Jefferson purchased Illinois, and it wasn't a state for a while. So.
Okay. Okay. But that's all I have.
Okay.
I'm assuming your next one is his cousin.
Yeah, Samuel Adams.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and skip over to that then.
Okay. That is really interesting.
Yeah.
They
pulled no punches during this.
I'd love to hear somebody call, like, could you imagine it's like early 1800s or late 1700s, and you're at a presidential debate. He's like, "You listen here, you fucking hermaphrodite."
So this is what Jefferson said. Adams was a blind, bald, crippled, toothless man who is as hideous as a hermaphrodite character with neither the force and fitness of a man nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman.
And that was Jefferson.
Jefferson called Adams that. Adams said Jefferson was a mean-spirited, low-lived fellow, the son of a half-breed Indian squaw.
Wow. Racism on one side, no trans rights on the other.
Right.
So these people, after the election,
gloves was fucking off.
Formerly best friends.
And this is the second presidency of the United States.
Literally, these people only made up when they're both on their deathbeds on July 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I'm sorry.
They died one day apart, correct? They died one day apart, correct?
Yes.
Several hundred miles apart. Like, I think it was Jefferson that had just written the response to Adams. He didn't know he was dead yet.
Yeah.
They corresponded for... so it was Thomas Jefferson, Madison, and I think John Adams. They were correspondents throughout their lives. So you have to understand, all these founding fathers, they were lifelong friends after this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they at least had very mutual respect for each other.
Mm-hmm. They are very much a country that...
They did, but...
Well, hold on, Nick. So they are very much a country that, in spite of their differences, made a union.
Right.
Like, despite how different they may have been, they made a government.
These two hate each other so much. This is the reason we had to put in the president, whoever won the presidency.
Hate's a strong word. And I'm pretty sure it's also not the reason they changed the law.
They had to, because everything John Adams wanted to do something, Jefferson said no.
They had different philosophies about the way America should be governed.
Hence why they put in that if president won, whoever was the running mate became vice president.
Yes.
These two people.
I don't think that's when it was amended. Because I did the Constitution notes. We can get into that later. But I think what the main point I'm going to take away from that relationship is you don't have to hate the person you disagree with.
Absolutely.
And that's a lesson that America sorely needs to relearn right now.
For sure.
You know, Democrats aren't enemies. They just have a different way of philosophical thinking. Now, there are some Democrats that I fully outright think are enemies. Mm-hmm. And there are some Republicans that I also fully think are enemies. These QAnon people are enemies. Because these are... Anyway. But...
They make us look stupid.
Yeah, just because someone disagrees with you on social issues or economic policy, it doesn't have to be a goddamn fist fight.
So these were, they're very much independent thinkers, and they, whenever you think you're right and nobody else seems to understand that you're right, it's easy to get frustrated, and it's easy to start hating people. But, Nick, they still conjured a country in spite of their differences.
You say that. There's a... can't remember what the two senators were in Congress. They fought each other. One beat each other. They beat each other with canes.
And that was way after.
One of them almost killed a guy.
That was in the Civil War, wasn't it?
That was probably over slavery. People were all hot-blooded about it.
But anyway, so...
Okay, Samuel Adams. So, political philosopher, cousin to John Adams, and the leader of the Boston Tea Party. Which, if you don't know what the Boston Tea Party is, you're a fucking communist. No. Boston Tea Party, in short, was a protest against the British tea tax. And a bunch of... God, what were they called?
Sons of Liberty.
Sons of Liberty.
That's the name of the
organization. They all gathered together, hopped on a merchant vessel, and threw all the fucking tea overboard.
There's a rumor. Now, we don't know this to be historically accurate, but there's a rumor that they dressed like Indians.
Yeah.
And we actually have, honestly, no idea. Historians argue today. They have no idea.
It's like the Washington kneeling in prayer. It's hearsay.
It's just
Well, we know that the tea thing actually happened.
We know what the tea thing.
We just don't know what they did. There's no consensus.
Yeah.
But
we don't know how they dressed when they did it. We just know they did it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because he straight up says I did it.
Yeah.
Which, as a patriot, I'm like, yeah, that was me. Right here, dude.
Do you have anything else on the Sons of Liberty? Because I know a few stories that are pretty brutal.
I don't have anything on the Sons of Liberty.
Specifically John Adams. So, one of our founding fathers had a son who was a loyalist.
Ugh.
And it did not go well whenever he visited Boston. Sam Adams took him out in the street, stripped his clothes, threw him in the river naked, pulled his ass out, tarred him, feathered him, and then lit his ass on fire for a little bit.
God damn.
He lived, no mortal wounds, couple of obvious burn marks, right?
Right, so...
But the dude lived, and he was a prisoner the rest of his life. Like, John Adams was, and he did this to tax collectors constantly.
Well, and
it became...
You want to stop drilling, you hit oil. Calm down.
And, so another thing he would do is he would basically like, hey, heard there's a new tea tax. That would sure be a shame if there was a fucking fire at your house tomorrow at 9 a.m. after you leave work, huh? Yeah, you're a good person, John. I wouldn't want that to happen to you. You don't need to show up to work tomorrow. And whoever the tax collector would, they would hear this, and then they would rightfully not show up to work the next day to collect a tax. It's absolutely hilarious, but also probably good we don't do that anymore. Violence.
I'm talking to my lawyer, and he agrees with you. And
okay.
Then I agree with you. Okay.
As far as legislative, though, he wasn't very influential, right?
Nothing significant that I know of.
Just a patriot, just a blue-blooded patriot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Red-blooded, but few quotes. So the first one it's kind of long, but it's worth reading.
Well, you better read fast.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains sit lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. If you weren't willing to sacrifice everything for liberty, get fucked.
Can I see the quote?
That's what it sounds like to me. It's that top one right under Sam Adams.
I got you. Okay. So the dude valued liberty. There's, no questioning that, I don't think.
He valued liberty above everything.
Well, so he's one of those dudes. If he came up and he decided, hey, we should have a tax on tea to help pay for this war, he would have no problem paying the tax. But because somebody else told him to pay the tax, he didn't want to fucking pay the tax.
He was a very spiteful man.
Yeah, he's like...
Well, taxation without representation was like the founding principle of the Revolutionary War. Really, I think a lot of these landowners in America got sick of fucking bullshit. But, the taxation from Britain was pretty excessive.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, to me, that's worth reading. Because, if you don't love our liberty more than anything, get fucked. I'm sorry I met you.
Mm-hmm.
Is really what it is. And it's not like I wish anything bad on you. I hope I hope your chains set lightly upon your shoulders. But you ain't my brother if that's the way you think. If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin. This is probably referencing the Sons of Liberty. But when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, I think that's really fucking relevant today. So it takes a certain level of vanity to even aspire to be president.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who I heard this quote from. It's probably someone from the Daily Wire. But they said, it takes a certain amount of hubris of what's the word? Cocky.
Egotistical?
Yeah. To think, man, I could solve all of America's problems if I just got that seat.
So you may have heard it on the Daily Wire, but that's a quote that's gone around forever.
It takes a certain kind of person, and it wasn't always that way. Because you could look at George Washington, who was willingly like, I don't even want this. Y'all just want me to have it.
He may honestly have been the exception, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So John Adams probably wanted it.
Most of these other guys on this list had ego that we can't even fathom.
Yeah. Well, they didn't.
And I don't blame them.
They found the greatest country on earth.
Yeah, that's what I say. They defeated, especially Hamilton. Hamilton at that point had never really lost in his life.
Oh, no. Ben Franklin's ego was just, I fuck bitches more than you.
That's the ultimate type.
That's just
the ultimate
facts.
That's the ultimate type of ego, Nick. But
if you're 80 years old, fucking bitches without Viagra.
Well, I'll tell you this.
Sitting in the wind.
Sam Adams didn't care if he died fighting them damn British.
He going to take as many of as he could with him.
He was one of those dudes. He almost probably thought he was a prophet sent by God to fight them. He was like, you're not going to tell me what to do. You're not going to tell me what my king going to do. You're not going to tell me nothing.
All right? Fucked.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, he was a large part of the revolution. Because at that point, we were just a flea. And he was like, well, I'm going to, use the mob power that I have and control Boston.
Yeah.
It worked.
And he did. I think he was present at the Boston Massacre. The shot heard around the world.
Maybe. That was Lexington.
Don't quote that.
That's not the shot heard
That's
around the world.
Lexington and Concord is that. But what you're referencing is like a massacre that happened
in Boston.
Yeah.
I thought that was the shot heard around the world.
That's Lexington and Concord.
No, I thought those were the first battles of the Revolution, but I thought the shot heard around the world because after the Boston Massacre, we were all like, okay, that's it. This is war.
Think about
it's just the first shot hadn't been fired yet.
So the shot heard around the world was, we don't know who shot first. We don't know which side. We just know.
Oh, we fucking know it was them damn redcoats.
We don't. We just heard a shot
and then it was Sam Adams from a fucking building.
It was a false flag.
God damn it! I'm sick of fucking waiting. Blue bulb for 10 years.
He probably shot and went, that means start.
Y'all are about to get so red-pilled right now, alright?
Oh, fuck. Oh, okay.
No, I'm talking about the previous thing.
So, no, so the shot heard around the world was, we don't know who shot first, but it started the Revolutionary War.
Right. Hence the shot heard. It started the revolutionary period for the planet.
Yeah. So, the Boston Massacre, if you want to look at it, kind of artful in a way.
Yeah, because we were tarring and feathering tax people, and the British
so
were like,
basically,
so
you cornered these fucking people who just arrived, fucking young kids, throwing rocks at them, essentially.
yeah, so essentially we had a drunken Boston mob following around these redcoats on patrol, and they were antagonizing them, throwing beer bottles at them, and then
They cornered them.
Cornered
holy
them.
shit, I'm about to defend the British.
And actually, I think the first shot was an accident. Guy got scared because they threw a rock at him, and he just
I don't
accidentally...
know how you act. That's good. That's
Well, like
safety.
hands
So,
on the
like-
trigger, right, and then a rock hits him in the
So
head.
their
Like
commander
jerks.
told them, we're not going to fire on these people. We're not going to. They threw a rock and hit basically a new recruit, and he just slipped and went boom.
There are some astonishing similarities between this and like protests now with police. Like, which is why I'm like, holy fuck, I'm about to defend the British.
So
Because
like,
they were the law keepers at the time.
so after
Like,
after the one guy shot, the British thought the Patriots were shooting at them, and they thought, fuck, open fire.
the
But once-
giant cloud of smoke coming from
once-
the end of your buddy's musket.
All you heard was fire.
Once the first shot happened,
It
all
was-
hell
it
broke
was-
loose.
yeah.
Like
And
there was
a bunch of them,
just
a
like
bunch of them went to
modern-
court. A bunch of them got one guy I think got his hand
What the fuck
crushed.
did they go to court for? Like, where did they go to court? There was no...
I think they went to
No,
court.
we had a court
Oh, we had
system.
magistrates, didn't we?
Yeah, so a bunch of them actually dishonorably discharged. A bunch of them were punished for it.
Really? I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know a bunch of them made it out of Boston.
I think the commander.
Well, you gotta figure, if you're the British governor of Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, fuck. Well, I know they're knocking at revolution's door,
Mhm.
and it's my job to stop this. Like, I gotta do everything but hang these motherfuckers
Mm-hmm.
for something that really isn't their fault.
Right.
Chauvin.
I'm sure we'll cover the Chauvin trial on. Okay, so this is going to be really quick. But did you see that they had the lieutenant of that department say that it was unnecessary use of force on trial? He said that.
I did
Okay,
not.
so
They're saying that's going to be damning.
So during the trial, 6 of the soldiers were acquitted. 2 of them, Kilroy and Montgomery, were found guilty not of murder but of manslaughter. So it was an accidental killing. This was in. Yeah, this was in the trial.
Wow.
I did not know that they even had a trial, Nick. Honestly, I
I-
thought it was a mob fight at that point.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's
that's-
crazy.
Props to the British,
Mhm.
I guess. All right, so
So that's it on Adams, correct?
I
Samuel
got
Adams?
one more.
Okay, go for it.
How strangely will the tools of a tyrant pervert the meaning of plain words? So basically, me and Wyatt get into it all the time. It's like, I didn't say that. You're just saying I said that. Like, when you're twisting somebody's words
Mm-hmm.
to mean what... I mean, you may think that's what they mean, but it's not.
Right.
You know? And... I think there he's really referencing, like, writing the Constitution. Like, how easy... Like, he's trying his best to make it to where there's no twisting it to where you can get more power.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where that quote's from. But don't quote me on that.
Okay.
So that's all I got for Sam Adams. That's
Okay.
it. Other than it's an okay beer.
So now,
Shit.
I'm not a fan, personally.
I'm not a fan of dark beers.
I'm not, it's just not me,
It's
to
a
be
shit
completely
beer.
honest with you.
I'm a whiskey guy.
It's not even, like, I personally like beer, but I mean, it's just not me. You know? And I'm not a beer snob, so maybe that's what it is.
I think
But-
they have a blonde, like a lighter beer that I think's better.
It's like a
But-
lager.
No, the lager's the real
I was
dark
going to say, I
shit.
think that's yeah. Okay.
Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, this one's going to be so much fun, because this is like your philosophy, Garrett.
Yeah. So Thomas Jefferson was as the third president of the United States, he is accredited with this laissez-faire type of governance, which is basically hands off. You do you, as long as you ain't breaking no laws, I ain't give a fuck. And the reason he probably felt that way is because he broke a lot of laws when he was prior to the Revolution and post-Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
probably. So, author of the Declaration of Independence, third president of the United States, purchased Louisiana Territory from Napoleon because Napoleon had to fund his revolution because he was trying to conquer Russia. Brutal failure. If you don't know what the Louisiana Purchase was, it tripled the size of the United States owned territories. I mean, it was huge. And he got it for nickels on the fucking dollar from Napoleon because Napoleon just didn't give a shit about it.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and touch on that because that's actually like really, really cool. Because
one last thing, he did begin the famous Lewis and Clark expedition.
Right. A lot happened under his administration.
Yeah.
So
as far as the expansion west, at least.
We wanted... so he sent an ambassador to France. Napoleon was fighting a war against monarchs, essentially in Europe.
The revolution.
Yeah. Well, he'd won France. He's an emperor now. Well, now he wants to end monarchs around the world. So he starts moving east and just starts killing monarchs, and he's pretty damn good at it.
Yep.
But he needs to fund it. He's running out. He's got the army. He needs to feed them. He needs to give them provisions. Well, there's this half of the fucking United States he doesn't even use.
Yeah, even the fur traders.
Jefferson knew that, and Jefferson's pro-France. He's unlike John Adams.
France at the time was very laissez-faire.
Yeah, so
that's where the term comes from.
Yeah, so John Adams was not. John Adams was pro-Britain, anti-France. They said if we have to keep one ally, we keep Great Britain. That was John Adams' philosophy. You'll find out later why that's the case.
You fucking British babes.
John Jay does a particular treaty that will make that perfectly clear. That we are that John Adams' presidency. But anyway, so Jefferson sent someone. He said, okay, he knows he needs money. And we would like to expand. So, but he just wants New Orleans. Because if you own New Orleans, you basically own the entire Mississippi River.
Yeah.
So,
and everything east of it.
We offer him, I don't know how much. It was $10 million, something like that. And before our ambassador can get that out, Napoleon says, we will give you for the entire land $10 million. And he said, deal. Jefferson made the deal without going to Congress.
That's how good of a deal. Yeah, Congress, I think, was pissed.
Congress was pissed. I mean, for one, it contradicted his philosophy. He said, to Jefferson, he was like, you can't go around the means and ways of government. But to Jefferson, he was like, look, I would be an idiot if I didn't take the deal.
$15 million is what we spent.
On Louisiana?
Yep.
Oh.
How many acres?
8,280. Or no.
That's way low.
8,280.
Let me see that number, Nick.
Square miles.
Yeah, 828,000 square miles of land.
So there's that. Thomas Jefferson started the first college in Virginia.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought that
Thomas Jefferson was a very educated man too.
And he respected education.
None of our founders were uneducated. Probably the least educated would have been George Washington and Alexander Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Because John and Samuel Adams were both political philosophers, and I think they went to Harvard.
I have no idea.
I think they went.
George Washington was not an intellectual. I mean, whenever he spoke, he was heard. But even Hamilton was a smart guy.
Oh yeah. So by no means are any of these people dumb.
Right. I'll say go ahead and finish what you got on Jefferson.
So that's it.
Okay. Well, here was Jefferson's idea of our military, basically. His idea for our military was you don't have an army, a standing army during peacetime. If you need a military, you rally it when you need it. Other than that, it's a waste of money.
Why am I using tax dollars to pay a military?
Which I think personally is relevant to today. It's been relevant really since World War II. We've had a standing army since World War II.
So the issue there is we're in a constant state of war.
But I think it's perpetuated by our politicians.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessary.
For wartime funding.
And honestly now, the military is a jobs program, in my opinion. That's more of what it is.
Kinda.
That's why you can't cut it. And I am by no means saying cutting military benefits like healthcare and dental. I'm just saying maybe, don't.
Maybe stop recruiting.
We don't need, 10 million people in the military. However many we have.
China would disagree because China's got a standing army of 200 million. Probably more.
Let them waste their money on it, in my opinion. But that's a Jefferson era philosophy. He was more optimistic with people too. He thought people were ultimately good.
Yeah.
And that they did what was best for them in their opinion. That is, some people think that that's wrong. Some people think that people are relatively bad.
So I think people always doing what's in their best interests doesn't make them good. It makes them selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And selfishness is not a virtue, in my personal opinion.
Okay.
So before we get in, do you have more on Jefferson?
Because
I love Jefferson.
I'm trying to think right now. I mean, he was the administrator whenever Alexander Hamilton died. And once Alexander Hamilton died, there was no, there was no thought leader for the Federalist Party.
Do we want to get to the bad of Jefferson?
Well, I mean...
No, not really. We'll touch on that on a separate podcast. If you don't know, he owned slaves.
And he fucked slaves.
But,
he was the first one to remove Indians from land.
Basically,
Well, that's not true. Christopher Columbus. George Washington. Fucking literally everyone was removing Indians from land.
We've been removing Indians since we got here. The one thing, probably, he ended on a really bad note. He forced us into war with Britain.
The War of 1812?
Yeah. So, basically, a bunch of American sailors were getting kidnapped.
Into the British Navy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were basically like, you got two choices, drown or join up.
Mm-hmm. And he didn't really handle it. And basically, so our government at that time was honestly a bunch of young, they're called war hawks. It was a bunch of young people who their fathers were the people who beat the British. So they think we can do it again at their full power. And basically, there has been, so for the past, decade in this time, because Adams was second, there's been a talk about we may need to go to war, we may have to go to war with Britain, we may have to go to war with France, we may have to go to war with Britain, France. And finally, these war hawks get elected, and they're like, well, we just need to quit fucking talking about it, we need to go see if we can fucking win. And then their hands get forced, and that leads into the War of 1812.
We lost.
We did lose the War of 1812. But
we signed a treaty.
Do we have anything on Jefferson really quick?
I got quotes.
Okay.
Oh, you want me to go ahead and go?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I got a number here. I'll skip the longer ones. I predict future happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them. I love that. Love every bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
Quit wasting my goddamn tax dollars. Quit taxing me so much.
Oh, really quick before your next quote, and I'm sorry. But, so John Adams, different philosophy from Jefferson, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like polar opposite. So, it's really the first time in world history we've went from one philosophy to a completely, 180, and nobody died. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, the transition
It's
of power.
called a peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah.
And it's referenced all the time now.
Yeah, because that was the first time in world history it had ever happened. So, the world was watching with bated breath when George Washington
Exactly.
left. And it was like, they're going to have to fight a fucking war. And then we didn't. And they're like, son of a bitch. And then here comes Napoleon.
And everyone thought we were. The British were betting on it. Literally betting on it. That's why they never... So, they were supposed to leave their forts in the Ohio River Valley. Mm-hmm. They kept them manned. Because they thought, okay, this American experiment's going to fail. Yeah. Right? They're gonna fight themselves.
You can't have people ruling themselves.
Right. And especially because they thought the people would fight. But basically, Adams won, no big deal, right? Because that was just Washington handing off the keys. He didn't really care. But once he handed them off to Jefferson, the whole world, like you said, just kind of watched. And they were in shock that nothing happened. Nobody died. Nobody went to war. There wasn't a screaming match. Nothing.
And then again, Napoleon sees that. Because, so, make no qualms about it. The American Revolution started the Revolutionary period in the world. The world saw what the Americans could do to the British. And then all these other colonies are like, well, son of a bitch. And then Britain was like, well, son of a bitch. We better take guns away from India. We better take guns away from fucking everybody. Because otherwise, they're going to overthrow our asses. Because we can't fight a war half a world away with modern technology. America... really, if you enjoy Western freedom today, you have American Revolution to thank for those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next quote. The legitimate powers of government extend to such acts only as are injurious to others. It does me no injury for my neighbor to say there are 20 gods or no God. It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg. So... basically what he's saying here is, unless you are doing harm to me, or you are wasting my fucking tax money, feds should stay out of it. The government has no place being in our business.
Yeah, true libertarian.
Oh, yeah.
In my opinion.
Oh, yeah. Like, in the purest... Like, if I took Ben Shapiro and I distilled him like cocaine, then Thomas Jefferson is what's on the other side.
And Ben Shapiro is libertarian.
Economically. I mean...
Okay, he may not have been that, Jefferson, but definitely, like, socially do whatever you want. He gave no fucks.
Yeah. He, like, literally, as long as it ain't hurting me, I ain't give a shit.
Yep. You know what was odd, before you go to your next quote? He didn't scrap any of the work John Adams had done, which everyone kind of expected him to do the opposite. They thought that he would just come in and just repeal everything.
Well, so he can't.
And start over.
He can't as the executive.
Well, but he had pretty much the will of Congress at that point.
So he could have made a power play.
And he chose not to, and I think that that's astounding.
Fun fact, he hated slavery.
He really did.
Yeah, his quote said that slavery is a hideous blot on the country.
Well, he couldn't have hated it that much, now could he?
Because he still owned slaves.
He owned slaves, but so his excuse was he needed to keep. But he fought the end of selling of slaves in Virginia. He fought for the end of it. I think he won. But he wanted,
no way he won.
He wanted to keep his financial situation stable.
He banned the importation of slavery
into Virginia,
so you couldn't import them in.
It may have been into the world. You couldn't import slaves after 1808.
Well, so you just have to sell slaves domestically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so. Right.
And there's still other ways around that, like Florida.
There's something to be said for progress, though.
I mean, I think incremental progress, like progress in stages, is still progress, but at the same time, I'm not cutting him any slack.
Yeah.
No, this man's still on, and he freed none of them. Not even the one, his main one where he had a bunch of kids with after he died.
Well, I don't think you could. Well, yeah, I'm sure
he could.
Anyway. All right. The man who reads nothing at all is better educated than the man who reads nothing but newspapers. As a friend of Benjamin Franklin, I find this hilarious.
I find that stupid at the time. Newspaper is your only information.
Well, that's not true. They still had libraries. Benjamin Franklin founded libraries. How could I forget that?
In America. Let's put it in America.
No.
Did he found libraries in general?
No.
Public libraries. Where people could go in and check out books.
Did he find the Library of Congress? Do you know?
I don't think so.
I have no idea.
I'll look at it.
Can I see the quote?
Oh, yeah. It's that last one there.
I would rather be... No, what did you say the quote was?
It's this one.
Oh, okay. A man who reads nothing at all is better educated than the man who reads nothing but newspapers. That is hilarious.
That is... Yes. I mean, so I imagine there was a bunch of newspapers during his campaign talking a lot of shit, and that was like a response to it.
Rumor, whenever he was running for president, a rumor came out that he was atheist.
Well, it's like, considering what the fucking mudslinging that was going on, like, I could see that happen.
Yeah.
So, John Adams did the Library of Congress. He spent $5,000 for books for Congress.
I'd piss $5,000.
Not back then, you did.
Not back.
But okay. Do we have anything else on him?
I got a few more.
Okay, go for it.
On matters of style, swim with the current. On matters of principle, stand like a rock. So this goes to Alexander Hamilton's. You got to know what you're standing for.
Mm-hmm.
If you got your principles, die by them. We in America do not have a government by the majority. We have a government by which the majority... We have a government by the majority who participate. I think this was to encourage voter turnout.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one. I would rather be exposed to the inconveniences attending to too much liberty than to those attending to too small a degree of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would always rather have the problems that come with more liberty than less. And I have to wholeheartedly agree with that.
Okay.
Is there anything else we have on Jefferson?
Not on Jefferson.
Okay. Nick, anything on Jefferson?
Nothing we'll cover later.
Okay.
I fucking love Jefferson, though. The whole laissez-faire governing style, I think, is pristine.
I mean, so him and Alexander Hamilton, they were the two competing views at the time. Who do you guys think you guys reference before we move on? We're only at an hour 30, so we got plenty of time.
We're only at an hour 30?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Who do I reference more? Or who
do you think you align more with?
Oh, fuck.
Well, I know who you more align with.
I mean, it's probably Jefferson.
Right.
Like, it's probably Jefferson.
You know, at first I thought I was a Jefferson guy, but the more I've read about Hamilton, I think I'm more aligned with Hamilton.
So they're not. I don't know that Hamilton wanted to interfere as much as some people think that he did. But
still, like,
for sure was not as hands off as because Jefferson was like, I ain't gonna touch you unless you shoot somebody, and then I'm gonna have to come for you. But you're gonna have to break my arm and drag me there to come after you because I don't want to.
Nick, what do you think?
I'd probably have to align myself more with Hamilton.
Hamilton favored order. And that's a huge thing for me. And I don't mean submission. I mean order.
I'm glad you said that, because people confuse the two nowadays.
Like, and he also thought that the only way America was going to survive, the one weapon we had in America wasn't our military superiority. We didn't get that till hundreds of years later. And it really wasn't because we were so awesome, because the rest of the world just fucking collapsed, to be honest with you.
Which doesn't by default make us awesome, because we didn't.
We did.
We lucked into it.
We fell just not as hard as everyone else.
Yeah. Not nearly as hard as everyone else. But if there was one thing America owes Hamilton, is the fact that we had the one card that we could play was finance. America had the resources. We had tobacco. We had textile mills.
Forestry.
He wanted
land.
Forestry. He wanted us to be industry, because he knew that was the way to the future for America. And he got everything he basically ever wanted, even though he was never president. He was just a secretary of the Treasury, and that's all he was good at.
He who controls the money.
And he basically, like I said, got everything he ever wanted before he died, except the federal bank, which he ended up getting after his death.
Yeah.
And we found out, God, that son of a bitch is right.
So you're pretty much right on almost everything he stood for.
He really was. And I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like, I like the philosophy of
you
Jefferson.
Can still debate about which one's better. The thing is, it's like so with Tesla, Nikola Tesla and fucking
Edison.
It's like Tesla was right in the end. He was the future. He's what we run on now. So, but that doesn't mean just because Hamilton's ideas won out doesn't mean that if we hadn't gone the other way, it doesn't mean there's no debate anymore.
Yeah. Well, for sure. So if Thomas Jefferson had his way, we'd all been a bunch of farmers.
Right.
We'd have just been a country, and there would have been, honestly, probably wouldn't have been hardly any public property. There wouldn't have been hardly any regulation, nothing like that. Just do what you want on your property. Don't fuck over somebody else. Mind your business. If we need a war, you gonna fight. That's it. So Jefferson was, so everyone was against no standing army at peacetime, but Jefferson's the one who pulled through on it, because Adams was worried about soldiers being kidnapped.
Which was it? Adams the one who sacrificed his political career for what he believed?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
We'll get into that. Like I said, this treaty that keeps coming up whenever we talk about John Jay.
We got Madison, then Jay.
Madison. What you got on Madison?
Because there is one more thing I want to say about Jefferson.
Okay, go for it.
I did not quote it because I'm an idiot. But there's a famous letter written by a merchant sailor to Thomas Jefferson saying, "Hey, I keep getting raided by pirates. Do you think I could put some cannons on my merchant ship?" And Thomas Jefferson said, "The fuck you asking me for? It's right there in the Second Amendment. Go get you some goddamn cannons." And as a Second Amendment advocate, I'm just like, that's fucking great. I love you so much.
Thomas Jefferson almost died to a fucking honey badger. Lewis and Clark sent one back from their expedition.
Oh, that's right.
In a box,
and it's a honey badger.
He opened it, It's either a honey badger or a wolverine. I can't remember which one was it, but it fucked him up. and he basically wrote back. He wrote back saying, "Never do that again, ever. Just
that's hilarious.
Draw it and tell me about it later."
It may not be real, but that's a funny fucking story.
Right.
No, that's like a well-known thing. Is what happened because he wanted to know what wildlife was out there, and he said, "Hey, so let's send this back to him."
How did
Okay.
they catch a badger? Anyway, all right, James Madison. So the only real thing I have on him is he's the co-author of the Federalist Papers as well. I know you've got more information on him. 29 articles, 10, 14, 15 through 20, 37 through 58, and 62 and 60 through 63.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Do you want me to go straight into the quotes? I know you've got more information on what he actually did as far as...
Sure, go for it.
There it is. Okay. The advancement of science and the diffusion of information is the best alignment to true liberty. So a learned individual keeps their liberty better. You know, you want to advance learning.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. There are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden means. So this is just a heads up, like, they're going to slowly take it from you. It's not going to be in a giant wave.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to take it from you little by little by little. Every time.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is that all men having power ought to be mistrusted. Same thing. Don't trust people in power. The running
But
theory.
vote for people in power.
Yeah.
Vote for people you don't trust, right?
I mean, yeah, kind of.
I don't think that's what he meant.
So what do you think he meant by that? The truth is that all men having power ought to be mistrusted.
Be careful who you give power to. That's basically the main thought of these guys.
I guess that's...
Be careful, because these men understood somebody has to lead.
Right.
Somebody has to rule.
Someone has to give power. Like, the whole reason for a government.
Be careful who you give that power to. That's all of our fathers.
I could get behind that interpretation. That one's kind of long. Here we go. Charity is no part of the legislative duty of government.
You're kidding me.
No welfare program.
You're kidding me. You don't know what that's to, do you?
I have no idea.
That was a church asking for public funds.
Oh.
No freaking way. You're messing with me. That's your quote.
No, charity is... It's right
No,
there.
that's the end. They cut that quote off early. It's a church asking for public funds. I've got it in my notes.
Oh, son of a bitch.
That's a church asking for public funds. He later goes on. He later goes on to quote Jefferson.
What's Jefferson say?
There is an eternal wall of separation between church and state.
Oh. Huh.
Yep.
Okay, well, scratch my... Well, so if charity's not the business of the legislature, then it still applies that you shouldn't do welfare programs.
Not true, because promote the general welfare was like one of the founding principles of this nation.
Yeah, but welfare
Charity
didn't
should have been-
mean the same thing as
As it
it
did.
doesn't... Okay. Okay, well, there's something to
But-
get into.
I think he wanted people to be charitable, not the government.
Oh, most of these people did, because most of them were charitable.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
But yes, no, that is very funny to me.
That's pretty funny.
Because-
they super did cut that off.
Did you
early
get
then.
that from Prager University?
No.
Okay, sorry. They have a video on these types of things.
I tried to do non-affiliated quotes.
Okay. But yeah, that's the prequel to that quote. That's hilarious.
Okay, so I got... Do you want to go? Or do you...
No, if you got more, go ahead.
The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny.
Oh yeah, so even
To me, he's advocating one-party control of all three branches of government.
I think it's just anybody, like any person can be tyrannical even if you elect them. Right?
Well, the accumulation of all powers.
Mm-hmm.
So the accumulation of all three branches by the same political ideology is the definition.
I
think
it's probably the same person, and I'll tell you why here in a second.
But it says but it's of one, few, or many.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, if you
so one, few, or many people, right?
yes.
Okay. So we'll get into that. So do you have more quotes?
Oh yeah, but go ahead and I want to hear your response on that
Okay,
because I'm curious as to.
So he's called the father of the Constitution. He's responsible for 3 big ideas that are his own ideas that got admitted into the Constitution. One was the Bill of Rights. Combining the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan, making like a 2-house, so like the House and the Senate.
A bicameral legislature.
Yep. Separation of powers and checks and balances.
Wow.
All of those unique to James Madison. We have those ideas because of him.
So I guess in context, so I haven't actually read the full. I've got the full Federalist Papers, like every volume, on order from Amazon because I wanted to read them for this and for the Constitution series.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose that could be in the context of like. So most of these quotes are from the Federalist Papers.
Mm-hmm.
So he could be saying like, look, I understand that if you accumulate power in all 3 of these, it's still bad. It's still tyranny. But I'm reducing. Like, he could be defending the idea of checks and balances.
I think that's what he's doing. Like, personally, I don't think he's talking about, like, because really, like, whenever he was writing this, parties were not really a thing yet, and that's why I'm saying he couldn't. Now, by the time he became president, they were.
I mean, really, after George Washington, parties were a thing.
Right, but if you wrote these, this was before Washington was even, right.
Okay.
So, okay.
Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives.
Mm-hmm.
So, inform yourselves, you ignorant twats.
Mm-hmm.
Several of the founders share that opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Where an excess of power prevails, property of no sort is duly respected. No man is safe in his opinions, his person, or his faculties, or his possessions. So just an argument against the excess of power.
Mm-hmm.
Another argument against tyranny from another founding father. I apologize if these quotes are getting repetitive or they're on the same point over and over. I just really feel like it drives home what these guys were thinking.
These guys were very much, if there's anything you should gather from this podcast, these dudes hated tyranny. And they knew that it was a real threat. So John Adams was often regarded as the smartest out of the founding fathers. Second would probably be Hamilton. And then third, Franklin after that. Who cares, right? But, so the same people so if you've ever seen like an IQ estimate for like, Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, or Isaac Newton, well, the same people who do those types of tests did it for him, and he's around a 155, which is genius level. Normal humans probably walk around 110 IQ would be good. He was 155. I mean, that's just incredibly smart. And I believe it after reading what he says. You can, read him, and he just sounds smart. And he's a pupil of Jefferson. Jefferson was his mentor. Incredibly smart guy. The fact that, these two, they were wanting, rather the House or the Senate, and he said, well, why don't we just combine them to make laws? You have to pass both. And everyone said, it was like magic when he said that. It was
Sauce! Get the steaks!
And they said, okay, well, we don't trust so-and-so from Virginia. And he's like, and I get that. And we don't trust, whoever's going to be president. And he's like, I get that. He's like, let's put a check to make sure that guy can't do just whatever the fuck he wants. Right. And everyone heard that and they said,
what?
My God, he's got a point. So
I'll wait till he introduces the fucking judicial.
So John Marshall was a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And here's what he said, because he was one of the dudes who he had to convince to get John Marshall's state to ratify the Constitution. And he said, persuasion by convincing, Mr. Madison was the most eloquent man I ever heard speak. So this man is just a persuasive god. He is able to convince people that his ideas are at least logically based and reasonable.
Well, it sounds like he's got the convictions of his beliefs and is a powerful speaker.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say a powerful speaker, but like, there was a lot of substance in everything he said, even though he may not have said it very often. He took incredible notes at all the Continental Congresses. So like, most of these quotes, if they're from the Continental Congress, I bet you they came from his notes.
Wow.
I'll almost guarantee it. And he
That's impressive.
saved them from the White House burning on fire. He saved...
In the War of 1812.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else on him?
I mean, yeah, defeated the British again, in a way.
Really?
Yeah, beat him in 2 battles. He was not a general, but he himself beat him. I mean, probably...
With a stick?
Which war?
Or with the arm?
War of 1812. He didn't win the War of 1812.
No.
But, I mean, this dude's a hell of a negotiator. Because not only did he lose the capital and most of the battles, but he still kept America independent from Britain.
I mean, that's true.
Like,
The
that
British,
is...
like, they stormed Washington. Was it Washington?
Yeah.
It would have
Yeah,
been
D.C.
at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. They burned it. And, well, we really got lucky, to be honest with
Because
you.
the tornadoes stopped them.
Well, really, Britain couldn't focus their resources on America because Napoleon was kind of doing his thing.
And we were half a world away.
And they couldn't really devote the time or the manpower to really fight us back. And basically he said, look, if you want to quit sending men over here so they keep dying, because we're going to keep fighting them if you keep sending them over here, you're just going to have to make them leave. You know, get all these, because they had all these forts in America and Canada. And he's like, okay, fine. If you want us to quit killing them, how about you quit filling the forts?
Yeah.
And,
Well, and especially, like, he's got a lot of negotiating power, too, considering Jefferson had just made the deal with Napoleon. Like, we're obviously kind of allied with France.
we're definitely more pro-France at this point.
And so it's kind of like, look, if you really want to do this, we'll do this. And France we'll send an ambassador to France.
'Cause
and he will know your weakness.
France
France
at this point was probably the military superpower of the planet.
Yeah, Napoleon was a phenomenal.
He proved how to use artillery right.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he just marched through Prussia and even marched through Russia for a while.
Say what you want about his ideology, but he was a brilliant
General.
Like, I mean, nothing stood in his way except the fucking ice storms of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Which stand in a lot of people's way.
Right.
Alright, so, John Jay.
Okay.
Wrapping up thoughts on James Madison. Sorry. Should I have...
He led to the greatest
that's
man
it.
ever, Andrew Jackson.
Oh, God. Man.
He wasn't the president after him.
No, but Jackson fought for him in the War of 1812. And
Yeah.
got so popular.
That's where he became famous.
Stonewall Jackson.
No,
that's
Old Hickory. Stonewall's
Andrew
Civil War.
Jackson. Yes.
Andrew's
Stonewall.
Old Hickory, Stonewall's
Okay.
Civil War. Not related, by the way. Make sure that's clear. That's what people think.
Jackson's a common name. Alright. John Jay. Another co-author. He's the third author of the Federalist Papers. He actually wrote the least. He only wrote 5. 2 through 5 and 64. He is also the first ever Supreme Court Justice.
Yep.
And an evangelical Christian. Like,
Yep.
in your face about it.
Mm-hmm.
So a few quotes from him right off the bat. Distrust naturally creates distrust, and by nothing is good will and kind conduct more speedily changed. Wow, hang on, I'm gonna have to read that again. Distrust naturally creates distrust, and by nothing is goodwill and kind conduct more speedily changed. Why try reading that and see if you can make more sense? Maybe I typed it wrong.
Okay. Go ahead and talk more about him just randomly.
I can't remember. Do you know who he was appointed by? It would have been George Washington, right?
It would have had to be either him or Adams.
Lord. Without my quotes. I must have typed that wrong. So
Well, here's what I can tell you about him. He's most famous for making the shittiest treaty in United States history.
Really?
Yeah. It's named after him. It's called Jay's Treaty. Keep in mind, John Adams, he's pro-Britain. So, at this time in American history, they're still at war with France. And John Adams wants us to take the side of the British. Here were his goals going into the negotiation. And keep in mind, Britain knew these goals. He preserved neutrality in the war, but more importantly, preserve trade with Great Britain. And Britain knew this. So he had no leverage whatsoever in the treaty. And here's the biggest takeaways from this treaty. So Great Britain got to define what it meant for us to be neutral. We, the United States government, had to pay the debt of our private citizens that were owed to Great Britain. We had to compensate Great Britain for confiscated cargo. And Great Britain said that they would evacuate the forts, which they did not do. So he comes back with this treaty, and basically Jefferson and everyone basically freaks the fuck out. But because John Adams had basically said, I'm going to sign it, so you may as well pass it, they passed it. And it's, John Adams said, better an unfavorable treaty than an unwinnable war. And, of course, Great Britain fucking loves this. But that's what John Jay is most famous for.
I can't believe John Adams didn't want to take it back to Britain. Especially when it's a dual front. They had...
Him and Alexander Hamilton, they weren't eye to eye necessarily on a lot of issues. But their philosophy with who do you side with, France or Britain?
We did share more in common with Great Britain.
Absolutely.
Even Napoleon was still an emperor.
And, Adams thought it was a fair deal. Adams was just fucking wrong.
Bent over, lubed my ass cheeks, and said, give it to me.
Yep. And this is eventually what led to the War of 1812. This because Jefferson came back and said, we're gonna fuck off on this treaty. And Great Britain said, well, we decide what neutral is. This isn't neutral. And Jefferson gave him the finger and led to the war at the end of the thing.
That's another reason I love Jefferson.
Yeah, if he didn't like you and he didn't think your ideas were good, he's going to give you the finger, basically. But that's basically it on John Jay. Yeah,
Then I'll wrap it up with a few more quotes.
Okay.
And, the wise and the good never form the majority of any large society, and it seldom happens that their measures are uniformly adopted. All that wise and good men can do is to persevere in doing their duty to their country, and leave the consequences to him who made men only. Neither elated by success, however great, nor discouraged by disappointments, however frequent or mortifying. Obviously the relevant part of that to most our listeners, and again, John Jay was an evangelical Christian. He's the maker of men is the Christian God, but the right opinions are very seldom the majority.
Say the quote again. Let me see it. You can talk more about it.
The wise and good never form the majority of any large society, and it seldom happens that their measures are uniformly adopted. So, to me, this is kind of the road to heaven's narrow.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Just because no one's accepting your ideas doesn't mean you're wrong. It just may mean they're hard. So, gosh, I think one of our founding fathers, who was it that was actually an abolitionist from the beginning? I think a few of them were like, man, we're going to have to deal with this slavery thing. But most of them were like, all right, fine.
So when the Constitution was made, the northern states banned slavery. They abolished it off the rip. So probably some of our northern ones, maybe. I really don't know. But
Ben Franklin would have been the farthest north. Alexander Hamilton was an abolitionist.
He owned slaves.
Oh, well, maybe not. Fuck, I don't know.
He owned slaves.
I just, like I said, I think the meaning of this quote is, it's narrow. You may not always have the majority behind you and still be right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ask Galileo.
No shit. Too many in your state, Pennsylvania, as in this, New York, love pure democracy dearly. They seem not to consider that pure democracy, like pure rum, easily produces intoxication, and with it 1,000 mad pranks and fooleries. is just a warning against majoritarianism.
Mm-hmm.
Our government was never established to be a pure democracy. We were always a democratic republic.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they planned on our government to be this big, though?
Well, Jefferson bought Louisiana.
That was before they drafted the Constitution.
But he also never advocated any change.
Yeah, well, we really haven't had any problems until the 2000s. Like, it's really never been a problem. Like, the only people really besides
I think political parties
Andrew
have a lot
Jackson,
to do with that.
Whoever's won the popular vote has typically become the president.
There's just a lot of discrepancies now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it for John Jay.
Okay.
I got one more that I'm going to just leave off here for time.
Okay.
So,
who do we got next?
Thomas Paine.
Yeah, this is the last one. This is
arguably the most important for America getting ready to fight.
Yeah, going to war with the British.
The most propaganda man we had.
Yeah.
The man knew how to write an essay, and I don't mean like in the formal intellectual type. I mean the motherfucker knew how to write to blacksmiths and farmers, and
hence the name Common Sense.
Yeah, his book was his famous one for the Revolutionary War was Common Sense.
Mm-hmm.
He had several decent essays. Now, the Age of Reason's one we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That's not really relevant. I think that was written post-Revolution, but. The author of Common Sense. Why do you have like a synopsis off the top of your head about Common Sense, like just some general facts?
Yeah.
About the book?
So the argument that he made was that colonists did not regard themselves as an American. American was not a thing to them. They were British. They're 4th, 5th generation American, but they considered themselves British, and basically
he was like, they don't consider you British.
His whole thing was that the monarchy in Great Britain affecting us thousands of miles away is ridiculous. And he said, you're not English anymore. They don't view you as English. Mm-hmm. That you are colonists to them. And, so he's a very advanced writer. But he wrote Common Sense, and there's another book called... it's called The American Crisis, but it's probably more famous as Crisis, or The Crisis.
Yeah.
But Common Sense is the bigger one. And he almost dumbed down the way he wrote these books, so that way average people could read them.
Good.
So it's like how Martin Luther took the Latin Bible and made it into common language so anyone could read it.
Well,
he just...
Thereby destroying the Catholic Church.
He knew. he knew the bankers weren't the ones fighting this war.
He knew his audience and how to talk to them.
Yeah, he knew it was the people who were pissed off about losing what little they had to the British. He said, "Look, you have to make these people willing to fight, because if they don't believe in the fight, you're not going to win."
Is it Thomas Paine that said, "Give me liberty or give me death"?
That's Patrick Henry.
Yeah, that's Patrick Henry.
Okay. And it was honestly the first thing that made people take independence from Britain seriously.
As a real possibility. Like, you know what? Son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm. That and Crisis was explaining, like, basically the current situation. And Crisis was after Common Sense. And it was basically like, hey, it's still not too late to get in on the fight, guys. And everyone was like, ooh. And they did.
He was a propaganda artist. But he really believed in it.
Yeah.
And so, because I mentioned John Jay was an evangelical Christian, Thomas Paine was not.
He was openly anti-Christian.
Yeah.
There's a book called The Age of Reason and The Rights of Man, both of which
call you an idiot for any, and not just, I mean, specifically, he really hated the Christians, but
yeah,
it just, if you have any kind of belief in God, he was like, you're a fucking idiot,
you believe
and I'm going to tell it to your face.
You believe in a fable.
You.
He was
yeah. I think he actually did say.
Well, in The Age of Reason, he actually calls it a fable. He calls the Bible a fable. Which, by the way, so did Jefferson. By the way,
yeah,
you should look
Jefferson's. Go ahead.
Look up the Jefferson Bible. Basically, what he does is he reads the Bible and he takes out all the parts that he considered impossible, and he was left with about 18 pages. The Sermon on the Mount was the start of his book, so there was no Old Testament at all. Period. Gone.
No virgin birth.
None of that. No, just this. It started on the Sermon on the Mount. That was the first, and then that was basically it. Just a few pages of Jesus' moral teachings, and that was about it.
So yeah. I mean, but heretical.
Do what?
They would have been heretical.
Who would have been heretical?
Jefferson and Thomas Paine. Like, in the views of the Catholic Church, they
Yeah,
would have been heretical. They would have been heretics.
Yeah.
Blasphemers.
Are in the filthy.
Yeah,
But either way, like, he had some great ideas. The dude, and I think I have some. I may not have them written down, but like, so one of Thomas Paine's quotes in The Age of Reason is like, so you don't. The idea is basically you don't have to be religious to be moral. So that's a very modern. That's something that's relevant, very modern. You know, and it's just interesting to see that argument so far back. And his argument is basically like, look, some of the most moral people I know of on the planet that you, like, you know, people back then, you also know of these people being supremely moral. They're not Christian. They're not Muslim. They're not this, that, or the other, which really in the West it was Christian or Muslim. But
right.
They have no alignment to faith, and you still recognize them as some of the most decent damn people here, and must be doing something right.
Right.
So basically, religion doesn't make the man.
He also thought that rights didn't come from God.
Yeah, rights were given by man.
He was very much. So not all the fathers believed that. Obviously, like even Thomas Jefferson, who was not Christian, he said that, you know, rights come from, you know, they're endowed by their creator. You know, and creator doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to Thomas Jefferson as it does to John Jay, who's an evangelical Christian.
Right. He may not mean the Christian God.
Right.
But
he believed the higher power gave.
Right.
What higher power is, he doesn't know.
Well, the big difference is that, you know, people have to recognize that power and they have to respect that right. Thomas Paine thought that it was completely up to the government. It was not. That was his explaining. Like, that's why, you know, rights here are different from rights in Britain, and why rights in Britain are different from rights in France, because they had a Bill of Rights. That's where we modeled ours after. And it was very.
And Magna Carta, right?
Yeah, sorta.
That's what it is. Magna Carta.
So that's where he thought rights came completely from whatever the government decided to respect the dignity they thought that the citizens deserved. That was Thomas Paine's opinion.
Well, he's wrong, and I hate him for it. All right, so I got some quotes from him. Independence is my happiness, and I view things as they are, without regard to place or person. My country is the world, and my religion is to do good. So this is, to me, it's just him advocating, like, I want what's best for everyone, and I don't have to be religious to do that. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever is my right as a man is also the right of another, and it becomes my duty to guarantee as well as to possess. I totally agree with that. Pretty straightforward. If I have the right to free speech, it is my job and obligation to guarantee you and you and you and everybody else has that right. Because if I have it, everyone must have it. Otherwise, no one has it.
Yeah, he thought in universal rights. He did not believe in special rights. Not unique to Americans either.
He would have been abolitionist then.
He's like rights for everyone or rights for
more against slavery than all of our other founding fathers. He also didn't think it. You know, he thought contradictions were like hypocritical within our Constitution, and he didn't have much influence in the Constitution.
Yeah,
but
he was a revolutionary.
He was a personal philosopher. He just wrote shit. He wasn't at the Continental Congress, I don't think.
Right. I don't think he was present either. He was just friends with people who were there.
He's just an elitist. I think, honestly, so, like, he thought rights that were ours, like Americans, were also rights to people in Britain and Canada and Indians and blacks.
He's like, what we're going for in this Constitution, or for this new government we're building, is
universal.
Applies to everyone, and we should, apparently, to him, we should see to it that these rights are propagated everywhere. I don't want to. So he didn't plan to be globalist, right? But if you were gonna arrest, I don't know, let's say like a Spaniard,
in Boston, I mean, you can't treat them differently in our judicial system because they're not American.
Right.
You have to treat them, they have to give them a speedy trial. They're granted American rights even though they're not an American citizen.
Open borders.
No, that's not what I was saying you was. I'm just saying, like if you catch, like George Bush, like if you catch a terrorist and you can't get out of the Geneva Convention by going to Cuba,
Yeah.
like that's, like Thomas Paine would have been like, okay, that's not okay. Rights are universal. It doesn't matter what patch of dirt you're on.
I could probably get behind that.
Right.
Okay. Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigues of supporting it. So if you hope to enjoy the benefits of it, be ready to defend it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Given his writings on the Revolutionary War, I think that's absolutely true.
If there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my children may have peace. As a father, totally, yeah. You're gonna make war while I'm a soldier, not my kids.
God, I wish it still was like that.
Oh, you're right. I could just send you two fuckers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you still go. You wouldn't fight for long.
I'm too old. I'm 28. Military won't even take me no more.
I say you're 40. Goddamn.
I'm not 40.
He's 40. He's got a white beard and everything. He's already gone bald.
It's because I'm blonde, you fucker. Government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. In its worst state, an intolerable one.
That is certainly true. He was not necessarily a libertarian like all of our other founding fathers were. He understood that we have to have a government. So
I would prefer not.
He's like, in an ideal world, there's no government, there's no laws, no one needs to write stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
But look, we're going for civilized society. We have to do this.
And men are
unfortunately. He had an optimistic viewpoint of people, but at the end of the day, he understood that people probably needed order, especially then, in that day and age.
Yeah. A body of men holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not to be trusted by anybody. It's same thread to me. No tyranny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is my last one. And I think this is really relevant today. He who dares not offend cannot be honest. The truth is going to offend people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Someone's
going to get offended by something.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah, I definitely think so. You have to be... In order to speak freely, you're going to have to risk offending someone.
Right. You have to at least be willing to offend someone.
And if your pursuit is truth, then I don't think there's anything wrong with
The
that.
truth is often
the truth
offensive.
that there's only two genders.
The truth is often offensive.
Mm-hmm.
Especially to a vast majority of people. To all of Islam, the truth that women have rights is really offensive.
Mm-hmm.
So with slavery, the truth that black people are equal to white people, that was a really offensive idea back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be willing to offend somebody, because you're gonna offend somebody with your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Right, left, fucking dead center. You're gonna offend somebody with your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to still stand up for it.
Absolutely.
And be willing to say it out loud.
Well, do we have anything else on anything?
Mm-mm.
Just wrapping up thoughts for the Founding Fathers. So, these people are folk heroes.
It's crazy how true that is, though. We know that they're real people and that they really existed, but it's crazy how much we think, dramatize these people.
Right, like George Washington and the cherry tree, or wooden teeth, or, just, I guess most of them are.
Man, I would prefer if he had wooden teeth than what he actually had.
Yeah, he had donkey teeth or something.
He had slaves' teeth, didn't he?
Yeah, he had human teeth, sheep teeth, cow teeth. He had a bunch of actual teeth.
Yeah, it was like Frankenstein's monster of dentures.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important, and I know we're not going to get into this on this podcast, but it's important to remember that these men were great. They founded in my opinion, the single greatest governing style in the history of the world to date. and have founded the single greatest country in the world.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't when we founded it, but it developed into that.
Yep.
Slowly over time. We didn't start off great. I mean, shoot, we had slavery for the first almost 100 years, and, but we developed a system that could do one thing that other systems up until that point couldn't. And
Without violence.
We could change without having to murder somebody in power. And that's a huge deal when you're talking about longevity. I mean, we're the longest reigning legislative document.
Really?
Mm-hmm. There's some speculation if you count Iceland. But most people don't, because they claim it to be like 930 AD, and it hasn't changed since. And most people call bullshit. Because here's the thing, we don't have the document.
Listen here, you 5 people in fucking Iceland.
But it's us, and then rather the French, or I don't know. But ours is really, really old compared to the rest of so America itself is new, but the Constitution, it's brand new, or it's not brand new. It's very old compared to the rest of the world.
That's really interesting.
Yep.
But so, I'm not saying these men were perfect, but for all their faults, they were still great men of their time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, quite possibly the greatest men of their time.
Absolutely.
And if you want to argue about it, fight me. But call me nationalist, call me what you will. I love every bit of what they did. And I may disagree with some of them. Like Thomas Paine, probably going to disagree the most with him, at least on his idea of God. The rest of it, I may disagree, but goddamn, y'all are smarter than me. So,
mm-hmm.
And I'm glad it was you who had the responsibility of doing it, not me, because I'd have fucked it up.
Facts. Yeah, I don't know that anybody ever could have made a government this good from the start.
Put the right amount of men.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nick, you got any closing thoughts?
No, but y'all pretty much hit the hammer on the nail. I mean, for what they had to do, they took an almost impossible task of winning first off the war, and then after that deciding what they should govern like.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't get it right the first time. They didn't.
Oh.
With the Articles of Confederation, they didn't get it right, so they went back and said, I don't care how long it takes, we're going to make this better. We're going to make this work. And so they just modified the Articles of Confederation to where government could tax, change laws,
mm-hmm. Gave the Fed power over the state.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, that was a big risk because the states didn't want it. It took a lot of convincing.
Yeah, we were very, very close to being 50 separate countries.
Yeah, and luckily, the Articles of Confederation failed on its face.
Yeah, it failed
because
outright.
as it turns out, you can't get anything done in a air quotes union where the states override the Fed, which is why we have the supremacy clause in the modern Constitution.
What made it worse was each state would have its own currency, and so a Virginia dollar was not the same as a Massachusetts dollar,
Georgia dollar,
and it was just so fucky that you couldn't get nothing done. You couldn't tax them the same because their dollars are worth different values.
I don't think the federal government had the power to tax.
They couldn't. So
they couldn't under the Articles.
No, but if they could, how would you tax someone with a different kind of currency that's more valued to different?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they pulled through and they got it right.
They did. They absolutely did.
They got their heads together and said, "All right, we're on the right track. Just make it better."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And progressively make it better and better over time.
And then
exactly.
Checks and balances came in and said, all right, we got something going. We got something going that we can improve upon later.
So last question, and just give us your last thoughts, short and sweet. If you think they got to see like the fruits of the government they had made to now, do you think they'd be happy? Or do you think they'd be sad, disappointed?
Depends on you.
Like for each one of them?
Just in general.
So Samuel Adams and me are going to party. Like,
yeah,
we're ready to overthrow shit.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of them are pretty unhappy with where it turned out. I know John Adams, I have a quote in my Constitution notes that say, like, the worst thing I could ever envision for this is devolving into purely a two-party system.
He said that he's partly at fault for that, but that's funny.
But I really don't think any of them would be happy. Like, so for sure, Thomas Jefferson's not happy, right?
Yeah, he...
Probably not.
I mean, Alexander Hamilton maybe is happy with it.
He's probably rolling in his grave laughing. Washington's probably happy.
Washington's probably happy.
Mm-hmm.
Watching the executive overstep its bounds.
Just because he personally wouldn't have done it doesn't mean he wouldn't be happy with it.
But someone did it.
I think they'd all be happy the country's still going.
I think they would all be happy that at least
there's anything
at the end of
Washington,
the day, they're like, at least we're still the same as when we left.
Washington would see the fact that we have now 50 states in the Union and we're not fighting each other, and he would just be like, wow, that's goddamn awesome, I think.
Like, you can get into it, but I think they're all happy that we're still kicking it today.
I think they would in general
when no one thought we would.
They would in general, I think, be happy with, Jefferson. He knew he lost his war of ideas though before he died. I mean, I don't think there's really much.
I think the only problem they would have is they all wanted to be isolationist. They didn't want to interfere.
That's absolutely true.
Didn't want to interfere with your European powers. That's why we didn't get into the French Revolutions, because we didn't want to.
Well, we also saw what the French were doing, and we're like, no.
Yeah, they were chopping off.
Well, that's different, because when the French came to our help for that, it was the French monarch that came for our help, or that asked us for our help, and we didn't want to get involved because
they're cutting people's heads off, dude.
Yeah, Robespierre was
he was
cutting
his
thousands and thousands. Yeah, after he cut off 2,000 something people's heads.
Goddamn executioner.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, that's it, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think that wraps it up for this one.
All right. We'll see y'all next week.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that little notification bell in the corner, and be sure to let us know if you guys have any ideas for what you want to see from us next. We're a new upcoming podcast. Share it with your friends if you're confident.